My mother's face went white when I walked into that library. Not pale. White. Like someone had drained every drop of blood from her body in 2 seconds flat. She'd been sitting there in her perfect black silk dress, dabbing at fake tears with a lace handkerchief, playing the grieving matriarch. My sister Claudia was beside her, looking fragile and beautiful like she always did. The family lawyer was reading from Grandfather Theodore's will. And then I pushed open those heavy oak doors. I was covered in blood. My white blouse had turned rust brown. My left arm was wrapped in a makeshift bandage I'd torn from a silk scarf. There was a gash along my jawline that was still oozing. I looked like I'd crawled out of a car wreck. Because I had. See, 30 minutes earlier, I'd been driving across the Lake Pontchartrain causeway at 60 miles an hour when my brake pedal went straight to the floor. Someone had cut the lines. Clean cut. Wire cutters. And that someone was sitting right there in that library, staring at me like I was a ghost. Because I was supposed to be dead. Let me tell you how I got here. My name is Paige Bellamy. I'm 36. And I grew up in one of those old money families in the Garden District of New Orleans where everything looks perfect from the outside and everything's rotting on the inside. My mother, Margot, didn't raise children. She collected assets. My sister Claudia was the golden child, beauty pageants, society balls, the works. She was perfect and pliable and completely hollow inside. I was the spare. The black sheep. The one who asked too many questions and refused to smile on command. While Claudia was learning to wave from parade floats, I was learning to pour concrete and negotiate zoning permits. I left home at 18 with nothing but a duffel bag and this burning need to prove them all wrong. Took me 15 years, but I built a $30 million boutique hotel empire. From nothing. Not a single dime of Bellamy money. And every time I closed another deal, every time I opened another location, my mother would just look at me and ask why I couldn't be more like Claudia, who'd never worked a day in her life. People always ask me why I stayed in contact. Why I kept showing up to family dinners and letting them treat me like garbage. Here's the thing about growing up in a house where affection gets rationed like water in a drought, you don't realize you're dying of thirst. You think that's just how the world works. They didn't start by cutting my brake lines. They started by forgetting my birthday. Then dismissing my grades. Then erasing my achievements. You learn to accept the unacceptable in tiny doses until the poison feels normal. I thought if I just became successful enough, rich enough, useful enough, they'd finally see me. Turns out, being useful was my death sentence. Everything changed when Grandfather Theodore died last week. He was the patriarch, the only person in the family who actually cared about the business instead of just the image. And he was the only one who checked the books. His death meant the estate would get audited. The will would be read. And my mother knew exactly what that audit would find. $45 million. Missing. Gone from the charitable trusts. She knew that I, as the only actual businesswoman in the family, would spot those discrepancies immediately. She didn't hate me because I was a failure. She hated me because I was the only one competent enough to expose her. So she decided to eliminate the problem. That's why I was on that bridge. That's why my brake lines were cut. That's why I was supposed to be in a body bag instead of standing in that library. But here's what my mother didn't know. Here's what none of them knew. Grandfather Theodore had seen this coming. When I hit that brake pedal and felt nothing, I had maybe 3 seconds before the car would have gone straight through the guardrail and into the lake. 3 seconds to make a choice. I jerked the wheel hard right. The car spun. Hit the concrete barrier. The airbag exploded into my face. Metal screamed. Glass shattered. And then everything went quiet except for the rain hammering on the roof. I sat there for a minute, tasting blood, feeling pain shoot through my arm. My ribs felt like they'd been kicked by a horse. Every breath hurt. The rain was coming through the shattered windshield, mixing with the blood on my face. And I thought about my last conversation with Grandfather Theodore. It was 3 weeks before he died. We were in his study, and he looked at me with these tired eyes and said, "Paige, I need you to promise me something. When I'm gone, you show up to that reading no matter what. No matter what happens. You understand me." I'd thought he was just being dramatic. Old man talk. Now I understood. He'd known. Maybe not the details, but he'd known my mother was capable of this. I pulled myself out of the wreck. Every movement sent fresh pain through my body. I flagged down a car, some tourist couple who looked terrified when they saw me. Got them to drop me at a rental place. The kid behind the counter kept asking if I needed an ambulance. I told him I was fine. I wasn't fine. But I had somewhere to be. I wrapped my arm in a scarf I found in my purse. Caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror and almost didn't recognize the woman staring back. But I drove straight to the Bellamy estate anyway. The walk from the driveway to that library felt like moving through quicksand. New Orleans humidity mixing with sweat and dried blood. I didn't change clothes. I didn't clean up. I wanted them to see exactly what they'd done. When I opened those doors, the room went dead silent. My mother dropped her handkerchief. The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might actually faint. Claudia made this small strangled sound and gripped her chair so hard her knuckles went white. Mr. Pemberton, the family attorney, stood up. His reading glasses nearly fell off his nose. Paige. My God, what happened? I had some car trouble, Mr. Pemberton, I said. My voice came out raspy but steady. I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes locked on my mother. Someone cut the brake lines on the convertible. But I survived. Margot couldn't speak. She just stared at me with her mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock. I walked to the empty chair across from them and sat down. The contrast was violent, their pristine elegance against my battered, bloody reality. Please, I said, gesturing to the papers in Pemberton's hands. Continue. I believe you were discussing the future of the estate. Mr. Pemberton looked from me to my mother and back to the document. He was a smart man. He'd served Grandfather Theodore for 40 years. He saw the blood. He saw the terror in Margot's eyes. And he remembered the instructions Theodore had given him 2 weeks ago. Slowly, he set down the standard will he'd been reading, the one that left everything to Claudia. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a different envelope, sealed with red wax. There's a secondary protocol, Mr. Pemberton said, his voice dropping. Theodore was very specific. He drafted a codicil. A conditional amendment. What are you doing? Margot snapped, finding her voice. Read the will, Pemberton. The one Theodore signed in 2018. I cannot, Pemberton replied. His hands shook as he broke the seal. The condition for this amendment was simple. It activates immediately if Paige Bellamy is harmed or prevented from attending this meeting by unnatural means. He looked at my bloody shirt. I believe the condition has been met. Margot lunged forward, but it was too late. The seal was broken. Mr. Pemberton adjusted his glasses. He looked straight at me as he read the words that would dismantle everything. I, Theodore Bellamy, being of sound mind and suspecting foul play within my own house, hereby decree the following. In the event that my granddaughter, Paige Bellamy, is injured, threatened, or impeded from attending this reading, the previous will is immediately null and void. The air got heavy. Suffocating. Effective immediately, Pemberton continued, his voice gaining strength, the entirety of the Bellamy estate, including the Garden District Manor, the investment portfolios valued at $100 million, and the 51% controlling interest in Bellamy Hospitality, shall bypass the natural line of succession. All assets transfer to the sole property of Paige Bellamy. $100 million. Nobody moved. Then Margot shattered. It wasn't a scream. It was this guttural, animal sound of pure rage. She lunged across the space between us, her manicured nails reaching for my face. You did this, she shrieked. The mask of high society elegance disintegrated into something feral. You ungrateful, manipulative little wretch. You hurt yourself just to steal what belongs to Claudia. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just sat there, smelling the copper scent of my own dried blood, and watched her unravel. This was the woman who'd demanded perfection from me for 36 years. The woman who'd never once said she was proud of me. The woman who'd looked at my first hotel opening like it was an embarrassment to the family name. Now she was having a tantrum in front of the family lawyer. Sit down, mother, I said. My voice came out cold and flat. Or I'll have security remove you from my house. Your house. The words hit her like a physical blow. She froze, chest heaving, realizing the power dynamic hadn't just shifted. It had completely inverted. She wasn't the queen of the Garden District anymore. She was a trespasser. Claudia was sobbing now. This soft, pathetic sound. "Mom, please," she whimpered. "Please stop. Don't you speak to me." Margot whipped around, turning on her favorite child. "You let this happen. You were supposed to be the future. You had one job, Claudia. One job. But we weren't done." The library doors swung open again. This time it was two uniformed officers from the New Orleans Police Department. Their rain slickers were dripping water onto the antique Persian rug. Behind them was Detective Coleman. I recognized him from the news. "Excuse the intrusion," Coleman said. His eyes scanned the room before landing on the bloody bandage on my arm. "We received a call from the mechanic towing a vehicle off the causeway. He found something interesting. The hydraulic lines weren't frayed. They were cut clean. Wire cutters." Margot stiffened. Her back went rigid. She thought she was untouchable here. Protected by her mansion and her name and 40 years of getting away with everything. "This is a private family matter," Margot hissed. "Get out." "Attempted murder isn't a family matter, Mrs. Bellamy," Coleman replied. He stepped further into the room. But he didn't walk toward Margot. He walked toward the weeping woman in the morning dress. "Claudia Bellamy," the detective said, pulling out handcuffs. "We found a receipt for industrial wire cutters in your vehicle's glove box during the tow. Purchased yesterday at a hardware store in Metairie. We need you to come with us." The silence that followed was louder than the storm outside. Claudia looked up. Her eyes were wide and vacant, like a doll. She didn't look at the police. She looked at our mother, begging for permission to speak, begging for a way out. But Margot didn't look back. She stared straight ahead, face like stone. Already calculating. Already cutting her losses. Already deciding which daughter was expendable. The click of the handcuffs was small and final. Claudia didn't fight. She just slumped. Her whole body seemed to collapse inward. The officers started reading her rights, but she wasn't listening. Her eyes found mine. And for the first time in 33 years, the mask of the perfect debutante was gone. There was nothing behind it but terror. "I had to," she whispered. Her voice was broken glass. "He has Sophie." I froze. Sophie. My 7-year-old niece. The one with the gap-toothed smile and the obsession with horses. The family said she was at equestrian camp in the hill country. "Who has her?" I demanded, stepping closer despite the officer's hand raised to stop me. "Dominic," she choked out. "Uncle Dominic. She isn't at camp. She's at Serenity Hills." My blood ran cold. Serenity Hills wasn't a camp. It was a high-end juvenile psychiatric facility on the North Shore. A place where wealthy families stashed inconvenient children to avoid scandals. Where they could keep kids locked up indefinitely under the guise of treatment. And it was owned by a private equity firm controlled by our Uncle Dominic. The man who'd always been the family's shadow. The one who handled the difficult situations. The realization hit me hard. This wasn't just about greed. It was coercion. My mother and uncle hadn't just corrupted Claudia. They'd weaponized her motherhood. They'd taken her child hostage to force her to kill her sister. I looked at Claudia, really looked at her, and the anger that had been fueling me since the bridge started to curdle into something colder. Something sadder. I'd always envied her. Hated her for being the chosen one. The golden child who got the praise, the dresses, the love I never received. But standing there, watching her weep for a daughter she couldn't protect, I saw the truth. Being the golden child was never a blessing for Claudia. It was a slow destruction. I grew up the black sheep. Neglected, but free enough to build a spine. Free enough to leave. Free enough to become my own person. Claudia never got that chance. Our mother hollowed her out from the inside and filled her with obedience until she wasn't a person anymore. Just Margot's extension. A beautiful, broken puppet who'd never learned to cut her own strings. She wasn't the villain. She was the first victim. "I didn't want you to die," Claudia sobbed as the officers led her toward the door. "They said if I didn't stop you, Sophie would never come home. They said they'd keep her there forever. Make it look like she was really sick. I didn't know what else to do." "Where is she?" I demanded. "Exactly where?" "Ward 4. Restricted access. They won't let me see her. They won't even let me call." As the squad car lights faded into the rain, I turned to Detective Coleman. My niece is being held in a medical black site, I said. A 7-year-old girl who's not sick, who doesn't need treatment. They're using her as leverage. We're not done here, Coleman said. But we need proof. Serenity Hills is a fortress. They've got lawyers. Privacy protections. We can't just walk in. I'll get you proof, I said. To do that, I had to stop being prey. I had to become the hunter. That's why, 6 hours later, I walked back into the Bellamy estate for dinner with a wire taped beneath my blouse. Agent Rhodes from the FBI had briefed me in an unmarked van 3 blocks away. She must admit to the $45 million, Rhodes had said. And she must acknowledge the kidnapping. We need her voice saying it. Can you do that? I'd nodded. My mother had tried to kill me. She'd used my niece as a hostage. She'd destroyed Claudia's life. Yeah. I could do that. Margot greeted me at the dining room table. It was set for 2 with the good china. Like we were having a normal family dinner. She changed into a cream-colored dress. Reapplied her makeup. She looked composed. Controlled. Like the last 6 hours hadn't happened. Paige, she said, gesturing to the chair across from her. I'm glad you came. We need to talk. I want to talk business, I said, sitting down. Claudia's arrest puts Bellamy Hospitality at risk. The board will panic. Investors will pull out. I need to know the full exposure. Everything that could come out. It was the right bait. Margot was a narcissist, but she was also a businesswoman. She couldn't resist the chance to explain her brilliance. She leaned in. $45 million wasn't stolen, Paige. It was reallocated, she said smoothly. Your grandfather never understood what it costs to maintain our position. The donations. The galas. The right clubs. The right schools. That money was wasted sitting in charitable trusts. I put it to better use. And the brake lines? I asked. My voice was steady. That was business too. She didn't even hesitate. It was a calculation, she said flatly. You would have exposed everything the moment you saw the books. The audit would have destroyed us. I protected the family. I did what had to be done. There it was. The confession. I counted to 3 in my head, making sure the wire caught every word. Then the dining room doors burst open. Federal agents flooded in. 5 of them in tactical gear. Margot Bellamy, don't move. The transformation on my mother's face was instant. The composed mask shattered. Her eyes went wide, then narrow. She looked at me and understood. The cuffs closed around her wrists. She glared at me with pure, undiluted hatred. You wire-wearing little traitor, she hissed. You think this makes you powerful? You think you've won? I am the head of this family now, I said quietly. She tried one last weapon. The one she'd always used. You're weak, Paige. Just like your father. Weak and pathetic, Anne. I know about the affair, I said, cutting her off. Grandfather told me before he died. About you and Uncle Dominic. Claudia isn't Daniel's daughter. I'm the only legitimate Bellamy heir. Margot's face went blank. Then she collapsed. Not physically. But something inside her broke, finally defeated. They dragged her out into the rain. I stood there in the empty dining room, looking at the table set for 2. At the untouched food. At the chair she'd ruled from for decades. The rain was over. And I was the only Bellamy left at the table. Sophie came home 3 days later. I picked her up myself from Serenity Hills with a court order and 2 federal marshals. She ran to me crying, asking where her mom was, asking if she'd been bad. I held her and told her none of this was her fault. That she was safe now. That nobody would ever use her like that again. Claudia took a plea deal, testifying against Dominic and Margot in exchange for supervised release and mandatory therapy. She's not my enemy anymore. She's my sister. And we're both learning what it means to actually be free. What it means to break the cycle. We have dinner every Tuesday now. Real dinners. Not performances. We talk about therapy. About Sophie's horse riding lessons. About the hotels I'm running and the life Claudia's trying to build. Sometimes we talk about our mother. About what she did to us. About how we almost didn't survive. But we did. The Bellamy Empire is being rebuilt. This time on truth instead of lies. On actual family instead of fear. My mother and uncle are facing federal charges. Wire fraud. Embezzlement. Kidnapping. Attempted murder. The trial starts in 6 months. And me? I'm sitting in Grandfather Theodore's library right now, looking at his portrait on the wall. He knew. He knew what they were capable of. And he left me the tools to survive them. The codicil. The protection. The inheritance that saved my life. I'm not the black sheep anymore. I'm not the spare. I'm not the daughter who wasn't good enough. I'm a Bellamy. The only one who earned it. Thanks for listening, and if this story resonates with you, don't forget to comment and subscribe for more stories about survival, family betrayal, and finding strength when the people who should protect you become the ones you need protection from. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones teaching you how strong you really are.